Right. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Since today is January 18th, I suppose I might be the last one to say Happy New Year to you all. We have quite a number of items we want to get through today. So we'll begin with the approval of minutes from the December 21 meeting. I'll entertain a motion to accept those minutes.
Move acceptance.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion about the content of those minutes? If not, I'll proceed with the vote. All in favor of approving the minutes from December 21, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. I believe that's unanimous. The minutes have been approved. Okay, the next item on the agenda is access permits, particularly NDOT permits.
That would be me, and I think I can be brief. As far as what maybe has changed since the last meeting, an update on Sycamore Parkway at Mann Properties. We are close to issuing a permit for the signal work, and that signal work can begin when the permit's issued, but the signal cannot be turned on until a specific amount of development is under construction. So no guarantee that that will happen here in calendar year 23, but you'll see construction work going on out there starting this year. And the only other one I saw from the minutes last month, the roundabout at Newman Road and State Road 26, we have complied and closed out that permit work. There are a couple of minor loose ends that NDOT will deal with ourselves now that we own the roundabout and all the ditches and inlets that were constructed. So, and it looked like there were a few questions on that maybe last month. That's basically an update. And if you guys don't have questions for me, then that would cover permits from NDOT.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item, this is memorandum of agreement by and between APC, NDOT, and City Bus. Tim, you have the floor.
Yep. So this is something that was originally put together in 2015, and this is an update to the 2015 agreement. So essentially, this is work that we already do as part of our normal planning process. So you will notice as I get into this that it outlines the responsibilities of the three different entities. So it talks about things like the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, Transportation Improvement Program, Unified Planning Work Program, Performance-Based Planning and Programming, Public Participation and Involvement in Transit Planning. And it kind of outlines what each agency will do to help accomplish the various objectives in those different categories. So this is something that we got a request for an update. I guess it came to us through NDOT Central Office, but I think the Federal Highway Administration asked, or maybe FTA, I guess, since it involves City Bus, asked them to get this going. So that's what we're looking at here. And this is something that at our policy board meeting earlier this month, they authorized APC to sign off on our part of this. So we have signed off on this. City Bus is going to pursue having their board of directors approve signing of it at their meeting later this month. And then at that point, it will go to NDOT, and they are the third signatory, which you should be able to see when I scroll down to it. Yeah. So we've taken care of our part of this. City Bus is in process. They're just waiting for that meeting. And then NDOT will be the third. So this is just kind of an FYI. Nothing necessarily substantially changed, but just wanted to let everyone know. Any questions?
All right. Well, thank you for that. The next item on the agenda is determination of fiscal year 24 through 28 Transportation Improvement Program, Complete Streets Carbon Reduction, and Protect Funding. Doug, do you have the floor?
Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, is that better? This is actually a really exciting day in terms of moving the new FY 2024 to 2028 Transportation Improvement Program forward, in that eventually in the next phase of, this will be step one, and then step two, we will allocate our federal gas tax funds, our local federal gas tax funds, to the projects for the next 5 years. Keep in mind that the next 2 years, pretty much this will cover, and then in 2 years we will be doing this effort again, so we will have an opportunity to review it at that time. But before we do our allocation, we need to do this determination process. In the past, we only did a complete street compliance review, but this time we're going to be adding the 2 new project funds, carbon reduction and then protect funding. While information has been rolling out in terms of these projects, or what funds or what projects we can do using these funds, there has been no guidance as to whether the MPO staff can make the official determination, whether an MPO like the Technical Transportation Committee or Policy Board make that determination, or whether it need to be done by NDOT or Federal Highway Administration. So, to cover our bases, in case there's any questions down the road, we are going to follow the determination process just like we do for our complete street policy, and have you determine that, make the official determination. So it's just basically making sure we dot our I's and cross our T's. So beginning with our complete street policy, back when we adopted our 2040 Metropolitan Transportation Plan in June, I believe, of 2012, we did adopt that policy, and not only did we adopt it, but all the members' jurisdictions did. And then we went through the process to become part of the county's comprehensive plan. And in that policy, it states that projects that are requesting federal funds, that is local projects, they have to go through this determination process to see if they're actually eligible or not. So what we do is, we as staff will review these projects, give you the information, and then you make that determination. So we have, as in the staff report indicated, looked at all of the projects. Of course, the 3 that are currently underway right now, that would be the Morehouse Road project, the South 9th Street project, and the Soldiers Home Road project. They were looked at in previous TIP developments and found compliant. No surprise there. Now, there are new projects, and I would like to go over those just real briefly. For West Lafayette, we have Phase 5 of Yeager Road between Calabar Road and Cumberland Avenue. Non-motorized amenities include new sidewalk, multi-use trail, and that will connect to existing trails. For Tippecanoe County, we have 3 projects. We have County Road 150 West, which is a continuation of the Yeager Road project, which includes new sidewalk and multi-use trails. Intersection improvements at 600 North and 500 West, which is looking to be a construction of a roundabout, and then also a new trail with Hawk Crossing. And then the Harrison Trails, of course, trails along County Road 600 North between 150 West and then on 50, between 150 West and 50 West, and then on 50 West from County Road 600 North down to the schools. Is that correct, Stu? And then for Lafayette, we have 2 projects. One is a request to fund emergency vehicle preemption for the traffic signal system. That actually falls out of this review because we're looking at safety projects. But the other project is actually constructing a portion of the Big Four Trail, and that will be portions of South 9th Street up to Cassuth Street, and then a portion of Cassuth Street. So in our review, we looked at these new projects, looked at the policy, and we have determined, we have found that all of these new projects do comply with the complete street policy. So what we are asking this committee to do is, after thorough your discussion, questions, or comments, to make the determination that all of these do comply with the policy. Is that fairly clear?
So, in response to the request, do we have a motion?
I have a question. Could you
Yes.
clarify, Doug, what you said about signal preemption? Is it in this package, and if it is, how does it fit in again?
Well, signal preemption, in looking at this deals with the safety aspect for the traffic signal system, and generally, it's not typical like a road reconstruction or construction project. It deals specifically with safety. So generally, that falls outside of the complete street policy, because there are projects that are exempt, such as safety.
So it's not one that's on the list?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
So this is a motion
Yes.
just to say that they comply with complete streets.
Correct.
I would make that motion.
I would second.
Thank you. There's no further discussion. I'll proceed with the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. You have approval.
Great, thank you.
Item.
Now, the next two recommendations, if you'd like to do them separately, that's great, or if you'd like to do them together, that's fine as well. Basically, the carbon reduction program is to reduce transportation emissions, and INDOT and the Indiana MPOs have been working together and developed a strategy report, and that was published, the draft was published December of 2022. And basically, there are 5 activity categories that support carbon reduction. These are alternative fuel and energy efficiency, active modes, transportation demand management, technology solutions, and an unspecified category which includes projects or programs that can demonstrate a reduction of carbon emissions. So what we did was we looked at these projects and then compared them to those activities, and as you see in the staff report, pretty much all of the projects address active mode, and then of course the signal preemption is technology solutions. So in our review, we feel that these projects are eligible for carbon reduction program funds. And then likewise for the Protect program, this is make transportation projects more resilient to natural hazards, including climate change. There's 17 different eligible activities. In the staff report, we went through and looked at the eligible activities, and we also made the determination that these projects are also eligible for the Protect program funds, so that when we go into our next step in terms of allocating our federal funds, with your recommendation or determination of approval, we can use these funds for those projects. Is that fairly clear?
So we can, if unless there's any issue, we can approve both of these together. First of all, though, are there any questions for Doug on either of these two items? Not? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the list of projects for both.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. I'll proceed to call the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes on both sets of projects.
Great, thank you very much.
All right, and that completes that item. So we move on to item number 5 on the agenda, the allocation of fiscal year 24-28 federal funds. Doug?
As you can see in your staff report, or your packet, this was a fairly lengthy staff report. With the recent passage of the new transportation legislation, as some call IIJA or bill, they are moving more and more towards basing decisions and allocating funds on performance measures. The FAST Act did it, as well as the previous Transportation Act. So in the beginning of this report, we have a bunch of safety performance measures listed to give you an indication, and then also our review. For example, the safety performance measure review. Recently, we adopted performance measures. One specifically that we need to pay attention to is the safety aspect of it. We actually have what we approved that we are going to be shooting for in terms of the statewide goals. And then also, here's something new that we haven't included for quite a while, is actually the data for 22. So thank you for putting that together, Aria. We looked at the projects, and of course, these projects will improve the road geometrics, and then for improved safety for motorists regarding the South 9th Street, Soldiers Home Road, Yeager Road, Morehouse, all of those improvements. And then in addition, the Big 4 Trail and the Harrison Trail projects and these other projects will improve the pedestrian and bicycle safety. So they should contribute to a reduction of the fatalities because we are actually improving the geometrics of these projects. The next type of review that we do is we actually do this in the TIP. As you can see in the staff report, we have 8 different items we look at. For example, one is the project in the 2050 MTP? And you see a table right below that where you have the yes or no, the information, and then just a summary. So this information, looking at whether the project is in the MTP, whether it's in the financially constrained list, has the project been previously programmed, and all the rest of them. Keep this in mind when we allocate our federal funds. The next thing we have in here, we need to keep in mind our impacts to the social and natural environment. And we do this through our red flag analysis. And thank you for another staff member, Michael. He actually went through and did the majority of these. 3 of them we already had done, but the rest of them he did in a very short time frame. The information that he found is listed. And as you can see, they pretty much all have the same impacts. So when these do advance or get to that point, they will need to be addressed in the NEPA process. And something new that we are doing this time, because we are now required to do, is that we need to look at the performance review, specifically in the 2050 Metropolitan Plan. In that plan, there are 9 goals with a lot of objectives and performance measures. We did an in-depth analysis, and that is actually in the plan, but what is listed in the staff report is actually a summary of those. So we also need to keep that in mind. And then if we go to the next page, we also have actually our available funding for our Surface Transportation Block Grant Funds, or STBG funds. You see that it's a little over $4 million each fiscal year beginning in 2024. And then in 2027 and 2028, we're supposed to use the 26 amounts. We do have to also remember that we do need to pay back to the NERC MPO $1.22 million because we are borrowing that. So Stu can have his bid letting tomorrow for Yeager Road. And we will also need to take into account that We will be receiving a little over $600,000 with the MPO, and that occurred in a trade back in April of 2019. So we have one other thing we need to keep in mind is our STBG funds, and this is a 10% set aside that we determined back in our 2040 MTP plan, that we all agreed that of these funds, and then we can also, and it's not over just every year, it's a combination of the 5, that we would allocate an amount, 10%, which would be $2.1 million, to a non-motorized project. And of all the requests, the Big 4 Trail and Harrison Trail projects qualify for this 10%. So when we do this allocation, we need to keep that in mind. We also have the funding here for transportation alternative, carbon reduction, and protect funds. And then on the next page, you can see a summary. The requests were over $44.5 million, and we are only allocated $32.2 million, so we can't afford to have everything paid for. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, we don't have the money. Listed below that is a summary of all of the requests from Lafayette, West Lafayette, and Tippecanoe County. You can see the project, the fiscal year, which they are requesting federal funds, specifically for which phase, and the amount requested. So, that's a lot of information to look at. One thing we also need to keep in mind is that NDOT still has this rule that we have to financially constrain each year. We cannot carry over funds, we cannot move funds, we have to be physically constrained within each year. How do we get around this? Well, we're allowed to borrow money from MPOs. So we can put in here, if we do need an X amount of money a certain year, we can show it as a trade, as we have been doing, for example, the Yeager Road project. When we developed the previous TIP, we showed it as a trade. We were allowed to do that, and we have processed that, and tomorrow, hopefully, if bids are right or good, we should have the money for that. So anyway, in the past, a long time ago, what we did was just have a spreadsheet up on the board, like what you see, and then we would then start year after year after year and just allocate the funds. It was kind of interesting is that nobody wanted to speak first. So we sat there in an awkward moment of silence for many moments. So in order to get the discussion started, internally we looked at all of the projects, we looked at all of the performance measures. Of course, we looked at which projects are receiving funds now, where they're at, and we put together a first cut scenario. And I like to stress a first cut scenario. This is not our recommendation, this is just to get the discussion going. And what we did was we looked at the request specifically for the big 3 projects, Morehouse Road, South 9th Street, and Soldiers Home Road. We looked at the construction cost and right-of-way cost, and we figured out a way to fully fund those requests. Now, for the construction years, we were able to do that. So next year and the following year, 2024 and 25, is the years that's due requested for Morehouse Road, the following year Jeremy for South 9th Street, and then for 2028 Soldiers Home Road. So that's the first thing that we did, prioritize, and we looked at those construction requests. The next thing we did was look at those projects and the right-of-way requests, because Jeremy, you need funds for South 9th Street, and Ben, you need funds for Soldiers Home Road. So we looked at when those were allocated or asked for, and we were able to fit that in for you, Jeremy, and mostly for you, Ben. For the second part, the northern part, we did have to split the right-of-way into 2 years. The first year is the year you requested, and the following year was the remaining amount. So we can get you those funds for right-of-way by this allocation, and pretty close to when you were asking for it. And it's still early enough in the right-of-way phase that you would have plenty of time for that. So, in keeping all this in mind, what our first cut scenario did was, as I said, we were able to afford the construction and right-of-way for these projects. We have to borrow we have to have 3 trades. So that's the downside. So in the staff report, we showed what year we were trading from and where they were going. So when you look on the bottom line for 24, 25, 26, and 28, we allocated all the funds. We have a zero balance. The only positive balance we have is in 2027, and we have actually a balance of $3,112,064. So the committee can decide to proceed with this allocation and feel that this is good, or we can start moving things around. And we can leave this balance there in case there's any needs, or, for example, if the city or county, Jeremy or Stu, would like to use those funds to construct the trail, either trail system, that would be an option as well. Remembering our 10% set aside, if we're looking at funding these projects as well as the other ones, these would get higher priority because we have not met that 10% set aside yet. So the downside to that is that you would have to pay for preliminary engineering and right-of-way up front. So that's the downside. So that's a lot. Any questions or comments on this, just to getting it to this stage? Stu?
I'm properly confused.
Okay, I figured as much.
So, to remain fiscally constrained,
Yes.
the projects we can afford how much additional? Beyond what we've already, the soldiers and the Morehouse and the
Basically,
Ninth?
$3.1 million in fiscal year 2027.
Okay,
Does that help?
that does.
Okay.
And we're thinking more towards trail because of the constraint, right?
Correct. Or the 10% set aside.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And if, forgive me, I don't even remember what our trails program was, about $1 million
For
for the Harrison Trail.
the Harrison Trail,
I remember.
the Harrison Trail,
2?
yeah, construction in 2025, $2,080,000.
Okay. And of course, 25, that's not a possible.
Correct.
So we're talking about 28 money.
2027, which would be the later half of 2026 and the first half of 2027. Yeah, because we're still, I know that's confusing, we're on the state fiscal year.
Okay.
So,
Okay, when you're saying
So-
27, you're saying fiscal.
yeah. So I'm assuming, though, our priority would be funding the construction of the big 3 projects and then funding the right-of-way. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you, so in 2027, the 3 million, we have to use it, or we can't set it, like, can it carry?
We can leave it as is and just leave it blank for now because it is out to 2027. we could show it as a trade to another fiscal year, but then we'd have to pick which project we want to trade it to and what year.
Okay, so and I'm assuming Phase 2 of Soldiers Home is 2029, and you're just not showing that, right? Because this is
Correct.
only to 2028.
The new tip is for fiscal year 24 to 28.
Okay.
So right now, we're just focused on those 5 years.
So Doug, what I heard was one option is to not allocate the $3+ million in '27 to anything. Should there be overruns or other items, and then some trading that those funds could be available to help cover some of those types of things in the early years? Or not?
We could, but it's very rare that we would trade more than like a year. So like right now, the trade for Jaeger Road, we're receiving the NERC MPO funds this fiscal year, and we're paying them back in 2024.
So what are some ways that money, if it isn't allocated, could potentially be used as insurance? What's your thinking if it isn't allocated for the trails? What's the value in holding it there without allocating it?
Well, in 2020, let me see, in 2026, we have the South 9th Street project. And then in 2028, we have the Soldiers Home Road project. Of course, right now, we don't know what.
They could come in over budget.
These are estimates.
Okay.
We could just leave that open, and then, because we do have trades between those years with other MPOs, so that if we leave it open now, when we do our next round in 2 years of the tip, we could look at those and move it to either 9th or Soldiers Home, in case their estimates right now are significantly under.
So that's the value in not allocating it now.
Correct.
On the other side of the coin, there's the 10% set aside.
Yes.
And the trails fit that. But if you allocate the money for the trails now, then there's a lot less there for this other alternative. So that's sort of the two alternatives you've put before us, I believe.
Yes, but the trails, in doing that, that would mean either the city or county, wherever those funds are allocated, would have to do the engineering and right-of-way with just local funds. That's the downside of that as well. So.
Thank you, Doug. Those are both good alternatives, I believe. We'll see what the suspenders are thinking here in the room.
Okay.
Gotta remember the safety of the children.
Not right now.
Here's the trail.
Is there anybody that has any public comments, by the way?
It's a
Okay.
request, it's not honored. And that's in this round, right?
So should I put both of you on the spot, Jeremy and Stu? What are you thinking?
Stu's trying to push for his trail segment over our trail project.
Okay.
But I'm reminding him of the percentage of funds that he's requested versus the percentage of funds that I've requested.
It's requested, not received. Okay? I threw the balls. But, yeah. Yeah, but there's still an open end whether that trail will either ever get to the city, right? And I've got little children that are probably going to be killed all around Harrison. It's for the kids, man. It's for the kids. Come on, how can you vote against the kids?
If they're that important, use local funds.
Same thing. Same. No, the trails is a tough one because I'm thinking 150 and the roundabout are both outside of the urbanized area, right?
Well, you know, it's interesting in terms of our funds, in terms of the Group 2 funds, that yes, they're mainly supposed to be used in the urbanized area, but we do have the option to flex those out to the planning area,
I'm
which is
going
the
the other
entire
way.
county.
I'm
Oh,
going the other way. Yes, you can go out there.
yeah,
But if it's outside of the urbanized, I can always have, there's always a possibility of going a NOFA on either of those projects, right, for Group 4?
that is correct.
So
Mhm.
the 55%, I'm just putting it out there. The trail is the one I'm never going to get Group 4 for. So that, I think in both of our situations, the trail is the one that this is our path to get cash, the trails. So, how much is yours?
I don't remember how much we,
You only had preliminary engineering and right-of-way numbers. You did not have a construction number.
Oh, too late, so sad. We're in there. And neither of those are fundable in this, the PE or the right-of-way.
Correct. For both projects, we do not have any funds if we want to fund the big three.
Do you have any idea what their construction would be?
probably 3.5 million.
I'll see if there's not enough money for you anyway.
It's pretty close. But you're saying if we say, let's use it for construction of the trail, then we're paying for PE and right-of-way, local funds.
That would be correct. That is the downside of it.
That there is PE and right-of-way in the fiscal years before that?
We had to basically, if you look at the table, the amount of money we needed to construct Morehouse, even with the two phases, we had to borrow money for the second phase in 2025. We're even shifting funds over in this scenario from the safety. And we just don't have enough funds to fund any PE or right-of-way, unless if you want to reduce those costs, like for example, instead of looking for an 80-20%, reduce the amount and make it more like 70 or 75, a split like that. And then free up those federal funds to use for like preliminary engineering for a trail. I mean, that's another option as well. But the downside is you'd be paying more for the project in local funds.
So, yeah, that brings up the other little piece of math. You said you've got what million available?
Pinch over 3.1.
Okay, 3.1, and that's for the 80% match,
Mhm.
which translates, if you divide that by 0.8, you're much smarter than I am. What does that come down to in total construction dollars? I'll get my calculator.
It's close to 4 million. If we make
3.9.
if we make one decision versus the other, are we able to amend?
Yes, we can change.
So I'm going to put my hand up for the Big Four Trail construction funds with us locally funding design and right-of-way.
Okay.
And then Doug, what is the amount that we would need to fund to get to the 10% set aside? So is it the full 3 million or is it like 2 point something?
It's 2.1. So if we put the full amount or most of it in, that would qualify.
So as long as we put in at least the 2.1.
Yeah.
Then we could also do that. We could put in like 2.1 of this 3.1. and then leave one floating.
Or even bump it up to higher to make sure it's more than 10. So that would then, what number would you like us to then use? Just program the entire amount, or what would you like to do, Jeremy? Program the 3.1, the whole amount?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm not the only voice here.
Okay. Follow-up? Questions, comments, rebuttals? Stu?
I'm going to say, what happens if the projects ahead come in higher?
As in
And-
terms of Morehouse?
Yeah, Morehouse or South 9th Street come in higher, then how does that trickle on down in terms of pushing? The only reason I'm asking is Soldiers Home Road for 2028 construction, depending on what the next 4 winters look like, on whether or not that road makes it to 2028. So I mean, that's the only thing, if we allocate, not that I have a problem with that, but if something comes in high, I don't know if we can continue to, potentially keep pushing Soldiers Home back, if all of a sudden we don't have enough money to afford whatever that happens, if the previous jobs are higher than what we anticipate. So how does that work?
Well, in the past, when we've had the issue, of course, when the bids come in higher, what we'll do is we'll look at, where could we pull federal funds from? For tomorrow, Yeager Road, we have an X amount. That's it. So if the bids are higher, then Stu will have to make the decision to either rebid it or accept it, and the county would then have to pay more. Now, Stu, you've paid more in the Klondike Road project and some of those, so it's more like a 70-30 or something like that.
Klondike ended up about, I think, less than 70.
So in the past, it has been not a traditional federal split like 80-20. So that, right now, looking at 2024 and then 2025, basically we're pretty much locking in 2024 for sure. And then 2025, we're pretty good. And then in the next 2 years, we'll develop a new tip. So we're going to revisit all of this again. So projects will continue to move forward. Jeremy will be moving, the South 9th Street project. You'll be moving the Soldiers Home Road project so that if we do program the Big 4 Trail, when we come back to the tip in that development, those projects, like we've done this time, will receive top priority. So does that clarify that? That make sense?
There's one, and I know we've talked about this before, but this idea of excess federal dollars that Kathy always has to get rid of, and we have the ability in Group 4 to go and say, hey, look, we're underfunded and you've got $30 million unallocated that she wants to get rid of. And the idea of having that conversation, whether the MPO could also go in and ask for that additional allocation.
Yeah, we would like to do that again, because generally it's like, no. And why, I don't know, because, they have the extra funds there. I don't know.
What I've been told is that the MPOs are one of the underspenders, and the reason that there's an extra $30 million, but
Yeah.
not this MPO.
Right.
We're always right up against it, paying 70% local because we don't have any money.
Yeah, and there are other MPOs, you're right, that don't spend their money, and they have actually lose their funds. For example, the Terre Haute MPO.
Yeah.
This year, they're losing, from my understanding, I could be wrong, they are losing money. And I believe Kathy Eaton McCallum, is actually taking over their federal funding allocation and doing their work for them. And there's discussion where they would also handle the allocation of funds, I believe, for Kokomo and Columbus. So, but you're right, Stu, we're one of the ones that always request money and always spend it. We're always on the top.
Yeah, we allocate every dime.
Mm-hmm.
And more. That just made me think when you brought up these over,
Yeah.
when things come in over and we end up having to carry the extra 10, 15, 20%, sometimes double our, like, I think, if I remember right, Klondike Road was an extra $2 million out of our pocket to make that project, so, anyway. As to the, I'd like to have some time to talk about this trail allocation. Is there any, do we have to make this call right now on that 3.1?
No, we can leave it on,
We can,
But I mean, we could allocate it like
we can,
next
Unallocate.
we can
meeting
allocate it
or-
right now. And if there's a desire to come back and discuss this next month, we can do that as well. Yeah, the mindful thing is that in, was it, I don't remember the specific date in February, we need to turn our draft tip in. That means we can change it afterwards. We need to have it done by May. So if we want to come back and discuss this next month, this part of it, we can do that.
Okay.
We could also have a meeting with us and then you two to kind of sort that out a little bit ahead of that
Yeah.
meeting as well, if that would be beneficial.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to kick it down the road a little bit. Investigate other funding options, maybe talk about it. Wasn't as prepared as I should be.
So to kind of summarize all this up so we can move forward, because we still have a little bit more work to do. My understanding is that the allocation, the first draft that's presented, is that would be the recommended allocation we go with. And then at this time, the available money for 2027 would be penciled in at the Big Four Trail, keeping in mind that we will revisit this next month. Does that summarize it correctly?
Okay,
I'm good with that.
Yes.
so you need a motion
Yes, please.
for that? So with that in mind,
Move what Doug said.
do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. I think discussion is probably exhausted for the moment, so we'll proceed to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay.
Great, thank you. And now the last funding category we have, I'm sorry, we're not done yet, is safety funds. And we have two funding pots, HSIP, Highway Safety Improvement Program Funds, Section 164 penalty funds. The HSIP funds, we can flex half of that amount to STBG funds if we need to, and we've already planned to do that. The only project that is requesting safety funds is the emergency vehicle preemption project, $108,000 in 2025, and then a little over $1 million in 2026. You see the allocation, and then to fully fund that, as part of the trade that we are going to do with the HSI, or with the STBG funds, we're going to need $108,000 to fully fund the signal preemption project. So it becomes a little bigger package that we can do, that we can work with an MPO. But anyway, we can actually afford both of these phases. We do have a balance of funds in 2025, a little over $458,000, so that the South 9th Street project, and then for the Morehouse Road project, if there are safety-related aspects of it, we could possibly tap into these funds as well. That's another option. So basically, the allocation of this is pretty straightforward with just the one project. Are there any questions or comments?
Can the project grow?
If the project, in terms of scope or cost?
Both.
If it does grow in cost, we could see if we could possibly borrow funds from either the year before or the year after, or we could split it actually maybe into 2 phases, and then like just we did with Soldiers Home Road, and have phase 1 in 1 year and phase 2 in the second year, and then we have enough either before or after to grow that project if needed or if possible. So if you wanted to join in, we could do, Lafayette 1 year and then you the following year.
I mean, I'm not trying to put Jeremy on the spot, but we've had conversations briefly about, we have our public safety has MPOs where they crossing the river, and we have same signal system, and we could look at doing something holistically, potentially, that would benefit both sides.
Yeah, we'd definitely be in favor of that. And even if we phased it, we could do priorities on both sides the first year, and then do second tier priority the second year.
Yep.
Okay.
And since Stu left, we can do whatever we
Well,
want.
he doesn't have many signals, so.
No, I know, just kidding.
So the recommendation would be to show a second phase in 2027. Is that correct?
Yeah, or if we
Yes.
need to chew up the balance,
Or, yeah.
we won't be as big as Jeremy, but, whatever would need to be there, I would be interested in.
Okay, because we have, in 2027, over 800,000 available. So if we programmed, say, $750,000,
Yeah,
does that seem too high?
Nope, that's about what our quote was for us is to do, is about 750,000.
So then the recommendation would be to keep this, is what we show, and then add in 2027 a Phase 2 for $750,000. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. Great. Any other comments, questions?
Would you also need PE for that? I would think you would.
Yeah, if it was possible to add some to that line item in 2025,
2025, yes.
yeah,
Okay, there are funds to do that.
yeah.
So add,
I don't know what you,
75,000 more?
yeah.
Okay. So just clarification, the 108,000 will be increased by 75,000 for PE. We will have 2 phases, Phase 1 in 2026 for the pinch of more than 1 million, and then for 2027, Phase 2 for 750,000 for construction. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
So we could have a vote on that?
So we will entertain a motion for that allocation.
So moved.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Great, we
Yeah,
got
the
one more
allocation.
little piece, and this is talking about NDOT projects. Because we have done for many, many years is that there are a limited amount of opportunities for us to recommend NDOT projects. And like we have in the past, we have looked at, a variety of NDOT projects. For example, we have a number here widening I-65 to 6 lanes, both basically north and south of what we're doing, or what has been done and what is doing. Also, the Special 52, following the report that was done by HNTB, and of course, the northern connector road, basically extension of what we used to call 231. And this year, we're adding 2, State Road 38 and on 52, sidewalk construction. You know, NDOT has a program now to fund sidewalks in itself. Last year, we did meet with the district, and I thought we put on a good dog and pony show and request. We have not heard if those, either one was funded or not, and I'm not going to put Bill on the spot, so. But we would like to, in the tip, continue these recommendations that, you know, we would like NDOT to continually look at these projects as this area's priority. So does that make sense? Is that clear? Okay, so we'll need a, yes, please.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. I'll proceed with the vote. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. You have that approval.
Great, thank you. Thanks for spending all that time. I know that was worse than going to a dentist, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Okay, the next item, the next section of our agenda is the APC progress report. Looks like Aria for the MPO update on 2023 traffic counts.
Yep. All right. So traffic counts. We do these yearly, and historically we've had a 3-year cycle where every 3 years we will count the same locations in the county and the 2 cities. So this year, 2023, our counts would be the same locations as in 2020, would be our typical routine. However, in 2020 and 2021, we changed up our usual locations. We did a 2-year kind of study of different locations in the cities so that we could have good data for our transportation model, our mileage model and whatnot. So our 3-year cycle for those 2 years is broken, basically. We'd have to go back to 2017 for our 2023 locations. And I thought this might be a good chance to kind of take a look at what locations we're counting, why we're counting them, and just revise the process if we'd like to. A lot of transportation planning is moving more towards kind of data-based planning. So we have, you know, data-driven decisions for what we're doing. So I was hoping that you all would be interested in using like either, you know, historic traffic count numbers or crash data or functional classification for roads to help determine what locations to count in the future instead of just the same ones we've always done. So I'd like to propose that with the addendum that if we change up count locations, they'll probably be substantially similar to historical ones because, you know, we've done counts historically in a lot of those types of locations where we've had lots of crashes or lots of traffic. So the actual stations probably won't change a lot in the future. And as always, we always take your feedback and suggestions for, you know, if you have a project you want to look at data on ahead of time or afterwards, we can always still change up individual locations each year. We always ask you for suggestions if you have places you want to count separate to our 3-year cycle. And then I guess one more thing. In 2020, we budgeted for 100 counts in Lafayette and 50 counts in West Lafayette, and then we actually took 80 in Lafayette and 40 in West Lafayette, so we had some wiggle room in case we needed to do recounts. So I'm hoping that that same number would be good for everybody continuing forward. So any comments?
Was it on our part that it was reduced from the 100 to 80? Was that because we didn't get all 100 counted?
We only scheduled 80 locations in case we had to do recounts.
Okay.
Yeah, it sounded like you had enough capacity to do 100 counts total, but we didn't want to budget every single one and then not have time left to recount stuff if there were errors. But if you'd like to do more than 80, we're happy to schedule more than 80 every year.
Well, I'm just saying that I think we have more capacity for counts
Okay.
than what we're being asked to do, so
Okay, that's awesome.
just an FYI.
Okay. Maybe I'll talk to you afterwards and we'll get,
So maybe we pick 80, and then we start looking at the ones that maybe fell off the list to see if we still want to keep those or not.
sounds good to me. We definitely have some locations we haven't counted since 2006, 2002, a long time ago, so. West Lafayette, any?
Yeah, that's fine, but I'd also like to, I guess, have a conversation. I mean, we've put up a lot of mile vision cameras at all of our intersections that do counts, that can get you information, that how we could all utilize that better, right? So, I mean, without having to redo. So, and some of that, anyway, we could have a conversation about that, on how we can get you access to that information.
Yep, definitely. All right, so I'll probably reach out to both of you after the meeting here and we'll talk some more about it. All right,
Sounds good.
okay, I think that's all I had for traffic counts.
All right, thank you. Next, Thanksgiving traffic counts, Doug? And also census urban area boundary update.
Yeah. As we all heard, you know, when we come around the Thanksgiving, be careful, there's a lot of traffic. Well, we got some data to show you. You can see on the graph here, these are traffic counts over the year on I-65, and this is just north of the Tippecanoe County white line. And as you can see, looking at it, the big spikes in November, and that's basically Thanksgiving traffic. It's just when compared to the entire year, I mean, there's a lot of traffic in just these few days. So going to the next graph, thanks, Tim. These are basically the numbers for over the years for I-65, and as you can see, you now officially know that Wednesday and Sunday before and after Thanksgiving are the worst 2 days to travel on I-65. Wednesday, you know, we have vehicle counts in the mid 60,000s, except of course for 2020, which, you know, we're not surprised. And then on Sunday, you know, we did, one year they didn't count. The counter was down for that one day, but in 2021, over 70,000 vehicles a day. So you can see, you know, Wednesday and Sunday are the two worst days to travel before and after Thanksgiving. So just kind of an interesting bit of facts for traveling on the interstate, especially at 65. So we thought we'd just share this information with you. Any comments or questions? Okay, I'll go ahead and move along to the census data. As you know, after the decennial census, they determine what our urban area population is, and that population estimate was released last month. For 2020, the census is saying that we have 157,100 persons in our urban area, which sounds like a lot. Unfortunately, we don't have the boundary file yet to actually show you what it looks like. But comparing that number to the 2010 census population, our 2010 number was 147,725. So the census is telling us that our urban area only grew by roughly 10,000 persons. We know that's not right. As if we looked at specific populations for the cities, the county from the 2020 census, they are considerably lower than if you looked at the data from the American Community Surveys, or even with us doing our population projections based on the number of new dwelling unit and apartments. So Our official number is 157,100. We know it's low, but we thought we'd like to share this information with you. When we do receive the boundary file, or when it becomes available, we will put a map together and bring it to you. The next step in this is that we will then work with NDOT and Federal Highway Administration to develop an urbanized area boundary. And that urbanized area boundary is basically the boundary where we mostly use our Group 2 funds and where Stu can use Group 4 funds outside of that. So in the past, we usually tried to keep it fairly close and in, so Stu has a better opportunity of drawing down other funds. So just a FYI. Questions or comments? And of course, the last is the 18-month letting list. Hopefully tomorrow, the Yeager Road project is on the bid opening, and I'm hoping that we have good bids for that. Not only is that project on the letting, but there are several others. A district-wide traffic signal modernization project on I-65 and 2 projects on 231. One of them being an auxiliary passing lane project. This was on a November 2022 letting, and the bids were high. The McCutcheon, the project number 1 on the list, was let. The engineer's estimate was $1.25 million. The project was awarded to Milestone for $1.296 million, so just a pinch more than what the engineer's estimate was. Looking down the rest of the list, 7, 8, and 9 are basically projects that were on the December bid letting and now have been moved to the February bid letting. Project 14 was moved from an April to a May bid letting. That's a district-wide project. And then on the back page, 22 and 23, we have Phase 1 of Morehouse Road and then Bridge 527. So in a nutshell, quickly, those are the information from the NDOT's 18-month bid letting. Questions or comments? Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Doug. So do we have any other business before the committee? Okay. All right. Do we have any citizen comments? It appears we have none. All right. Then I will entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Second. Aye.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, I think I got unanimous. So the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.